Hello everyone, tonight I want to take you on a journey to a place that has baffled sailors, intrigued locals, and unsettled historians for over a century. A lonely stretch of coast where the wind never ceases to howl and the waves crash endlessly against black jagged rocks. A place where Lighthouse stands tall, weather, beaten and aged, yet still shining its bright beam into the night sky. Even though no one has tended to it for decades, no electricity runs to it, and no official records acknowledge its functioning. This is the story of the mysterious lighthouse that shines without keepers, a beacon from nowhere, and once you hear its tale, you may never look at the sea the same way again. The lighthouse in question rests on a desolate headland off the coast of northern Scotland, far removed from any towns or villages, surrounded by treacherous cliffs and crashing tides that make access almost impossible except by sea. For centuries, the area has been known to sailors as a graveyard of ships, a place where sudden storms sweep in without warning, where compasses seem to falter, and where voices on the wind sometimes call out warnings or wails of despair. Local fishermen used to give the headland a wide berth, telling tales of strange lights on the cliffs, figures wandering at night, and an eerie sense that the land itself wanted them gone. When the lighthouse was first constructed in the late 1800s, it was hailed as a triumph of engineering, a much-needed safeguard for vessels navigating the dangerous waters of the North Sea. For a time, the presence of the lighthouse brought comfort to sailors and locals alike. Its tall, gleaming tower promised guidance and safety in the storm. 3 keepers were stationed there, living in a small adjoining cottage, their job to keep the light burning through every dark night and violent storm. Records show that for several years everything seemed ordinary, the keepers performing their duties, logging daily entries, and receiving supply runs every fortnight. But then, as suddenly as a storm rolling in from the sea, everything changed. In the winter of 1901, the supply ship arrived as usual to bring provisions, only to find the lighthouse door ajar, the living quarters abandoned, and the keepers nowhere to be found. Their coats were still hanging on hooks by the door, meals half prepared on the table, and a single chair overturned as though someone had left in haste. The lighthouse light itself was burning steadily, but the men who should have been maintaining it were gone. A frantic search was launched, scouring the cliffs and nearby waters, but no bodies were ever recovered, no trace of struggle, no sign of departure. Official reports concluded that the men had likely been swept away by a sudden wave while tending the lamp or checking the storm shutters, but locals whispered something darker, something about voices on the wind luring the keepers to their doom, about shadowy figures seen on the rocks that night, and about a curse that had long haunted the headland. After that, things only grew stranger. Replacement keepers were assigned, but they too reported eerie experiences. The sound of footsteps echoing in empty corridors, strange whispers drifting through the walls, and at night, the chilling feeling of unseen eyes watching from the stairwell. Several begged to be transferred within weeks of arrival. By 1912, the lighthouse was officially decommissioned, declared unsafe and unmanageable, and all keepers were withdrawn. Its light, it was said, would no longer shine. But that is where the mystery begins. For despite being decommissioned, despite no fuel, no electricity, and no staff, sailors continue to report seeing the beam of the lighthouse sweeping across the waves, warning them away from the cliffs, guiding them through storms. Some captains even noted that without its glow, their ships surely would have been dashed to pieces on the rocks. Maritime authorities dismissed these accounts as mistaken sightings, perhaps of other lighthouses along the coast, yet the testimonies continued for decades, from ship to ship, from captain to fisherman, always describing the same tall, weather-worn tower casting its bright eye into the blackness of night. As years passed, the stories surrounding the lighthouse grew darker still. Some claimed the light was no longer a warning but a lure, drawing ships closer to destruction. In 1935, a cargo vessel reported following the beam through a dense fog, only to find themselves nearly wrecked on the cliffs. They escaped narrowly, but when they looked back to identify their savior, the lighthouse had vanished into the mist, its glow extinguished as suddenly as it appeared. Others spoke of ghostly figures glimpsed within the lantern room at night, shadowy outlines tending to the lamp even though no human hand had touched it for years. One fisherman swore he saw 3 men standing side by side in the tower, their eyes glowing faintly like embers, staring out to sea. He recognized their faces from old photographs in the village pub, faces of the very keepers who had vanished without trace in 1901. Local folklore began to paint the lighthouse as cursed, its beam lit not by oil or electricity, but by the restless souls of the vanished keepers, forever bound to their duty. They had not abandoned the light, people said. They had become the light. Some villagers avoided the coast entirely, fearing that to look upon the glowing tower was to invite misfortune, while others left offerings at the cliff's edge, bread, coins, even bottles of whiskey, to appease the spirits and ensure safe passage at sea. Children were warned never to wander near the headland, lest they hear the whispers that had lured the keepers to their fate. By the 1960s, the story had become legend, a tale swapped by sailors in pubs and told by grandparents to died children. Yet there were still those who swore the lighthouse was real, that they had seen its light piercing through the fog with their own eyes. Some even claimed to have set foot on the headland and found the tower still standing, though crumbling, its door swinging open in the wind, the smell of salt and soot lingering in the air. Inside, the spiral staircase was said to be damp and moss-covered, but in the lantern room the great lamp gleamed with unnatural brightness, cold to the touch, yet burning without flame. And if one lingered too long, they said, a voice would whisper your name, soft and beckoning, until you felt the overwhelming urge to step closer to the glass, closer to the edge, closer to the drop into the dark sea below. Even now, in the modern day, with GPS navigation and satellite tracking, sailors crossing those waters sometimes report an unexplained light in the distance, a steady, sweeping beam that disappears the moment they try to chart it. Amateur ghost hunters have made attempts to locate the lighthouse, scouring maps and archives, but its exact coordinates seem to shift like the tide. Some claim it cannot be found by those who search for it, only by those lost and in need. One haunting account from 1998 tells of a small yacht caught in a violent storm. The crew swore that a brilliant light guided them safely to calmer waters, but when they traced their route on modern charts, no lighthouse should have been there at all. And so the mystery endures. Is the lighthouse truly haunted by the spirits of its long-lost keepers, forever carrying out their duty from beyond the grave? Is it some strange atmospheric phenomenon, a trick of light and mist upon the sea? Or could it be something older, something that existed before the structure itself, an eternal beacon that chooses when and to whom it will appear? No one can say for certain, but one thing is undeniable. The light still shines, though no human hand fuels its flame. The legend of the lighthouse that shines without keepers refuses to fade, because every decade new witnesses step forward with stories too consistent and too vivid to be ignored. Take, for example, the account of a retired naval officer named James Carow, who in 2003 was sailing alone along the northern coast of Scotland. A violent squall caught him off guard, tossing his small vessel like a toy in the black waters. He later wrote in his journal that just when he believed all was lost, a brilliant beam cut through the storm, steady and unwavering, guiding him toward a safe passage between the rocks. He followed it desperately, and within an hour the seas calmed and he reached sheltered waters. Yet, when he checked his maps, there was no lighthouse marked anywhere near his route. He swore that without the mysterious beacon, he would never have survived. His story was dismissed by many as the ramblings of an old man shaken by trauma, but to those who knew the legend, his words carried a chilling truth. The light had once again appeared for one in need. But for every tale of salvation, there are darker stories. Some who see the light are never seen again. A group of thrill-seeking hikers in 2010 decided to test the myth for themselves. They set out toward the headland on a moonless night, determined to capture footage of the Phantom Tower. Hours passed without event, until suddenly one of them spotted a faint glow sweeping across the sea. Excited, they followed it, scrambling closer to the cliffs. The last footage recovered from their camera shows the beam blazing brighter and brighter, the wind howling louder, and then, just before the recording cuts out, the sound of someone whispering, a long-drawn call like a voice from deep water. 3 of the hikers never returned. Search parties scoured the cliffs for weeks, but no bodies were ever recovered. Locals shook their heads and muttered the old warnings: never chase the light, never answer the call. Psychologists who have studied the accounts suggest that what people experience may be a form of mass suggestion, a blend of folklore, fear, and natural phenomena. They point to rare atmospheric effects, such as fata morgana, mirages, or ball lightning, that could create illusions of a light where none exists. Yet these explanations falter when faced with consistent details across centuries. The same tower shape, the same slow sweeping beam, the same chilling whispers reported by witnesses who never knew each other. Could coincidence truly bind such stories together? Or is there something more enduring at work? Even more unsettling are the records that seem to vanish or alter when the lighthouse is investigated officially. Maritime archives from the early 1900s list the decommissioning of the tower, yet inspection of those same records a decade later showed gaps, missing pages, and notes crossed out in ink as though someone, or something, did not wish the truth to be known. A historian named Margaret Lyle claimed to have uncovered photographs of the original keepers, 3 solemn men standing proudly beside the lantern room. But when she attempted to publish her findings, the photographs deteriorated rapidly, their images fading to blank gray within weeks. She insisted to colleagues that the faces seemed to vanish first, leaving only the outlines of their uniforms before dissolving completely. To her, it was proof that the keepers were not gone, but transformed into something else, bound into the very fabric of the light itself. One theory whispered among occult researchers is that the lighthouse stands upon an ancient site, long before stone or mortar was ever laid, a place where the boundary between worlds is thin. Perhaps the keepers who vanished were not lost to the sea, but pulled into another realm, forever repeating their duty as guardians. The beam may not be light at all, but something older, a manifestation of souls tethered to a purpose beyond death. Those who are saved by it may be blessed, while those who pursue it may be claimed, their essence feeding the eternal flame. Travelers who dare to approach the headland in modern times speak of a peculiar sensation as they near, a heaviness in the air, as though unseen eyes press upon them. Birds refuse to circle overhead, and the tide seems to grow restless, churning and foaming against the rocks. Some claim to hear faint bells, though no buoy lies nearby. Others report the distinct smell of oil and smoke, as if the lamp still burned with fuel that hasn't existed there for over a century. And always, just at the edge of sight, a pale glow pulses from the cliffs, like a heartbeat in the night. There was one account in 2017 from a Coast Guard patrol that remains classified in detail, though fragments have leaked into local rumor. A storm had risen suddenly, and radar picked up a faint distress signal. The patrol crew reported seeing a lighthouse beam cutting the darkness, steady and calm, guiding them toward the source. They followed, but instead of finding a vessel, they discovered themselves circling dangerously close to the cliffs. Just as they realized the danger, the light winked out, and in its place stood nothing but darkness and waves crashing against stone. Later, when their instruments were checked, the recordings showed no evidence of any light at all. The crew, however, remain adamant. They all saw it, every one of them. Skeptics dismiss the legend as folklore inflated by imagination, a tale for tourists and ghost hunters. But those who have been at sea, those who have felt the terror of being lost in a storm, speak with a different tone when the lighthouse is mentioned. They lower their voices, their eyes clouding with something between awe and fear, and they say simply, "The light is real." So, what are we left with? A haunted tower, a supernatural guardian, or a trick of the mind? Perhaps the answer lies in the way the stories endure, passed from one generation to the next, always reshaped, yet always carrying the same kernel of truth, that on storm-lashed nights off the northern coast of Scotland, when hope seems lost and the sea roars like a hungry beast, a light shines where no light should be, and it may save you or it may claim you, depending on what it seeks in you. Even now, if you were to find yourself on that coastline, you might see it for yourself. Stand long enough on the cliff's edge, and you may catch a glimpse of the tower rising ghost-like against the horizon, its lamp turning slowly, sweeping the waves with cold brilliance. But beware, for if the whisper follows, if you hear your name carried on the wind, do not answer, do not step forward, and do not look too long into the glow. For the lighthouse that shines without keepers is not merely a guide for lost sailors. It is a beacon from nowhere, a call from beyond, and once you follow it, you may never find your way back. And so the mystery endures, carried on salt winds and crashing waves, an eternal reminder that some lights are not meant to be followed, and some doors, once opened, can never again be closed.